Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope you've had a good week and appreciate you being here this morning with me begin looking at the 84th Psalm. This is a great Psalm. Um, I know I've said that probably 84 times now, but this is a wonderful Psalm, and there's several ways to approach this Psalm, and I'm just going to address two of them real quickly. One of the ways is to look at this Psalm a uh, as longing for heaven, longing to be with God in heaven. But I think an even more, and you can do that, and that wouldn't be wrong. But I think an even more appropriate, relevant application of this psalm would be in discussing the psalmist's desire to be in the presence of God. As believers, as Christians, we have the Holy Spirit dwelling in us, and so we can enjoy the presence of God now. We don't have to wait till the future. We don't have to wait till heaven, but we can enjoy the very presence of God today. And so this psalm was probably originally written, tells us in the superscription that it is a psalm for the sons of Korah, that most likely this psalm was written during a time when the Israelites were had been taken out of Israel. And this was their song, this was their desire to get back to Jerusalem, to be able to get back into the tabernacle, most likely written while they were during their Babylonian captivity, and they were writing. The song was again of their desire to get back to Jerusalem, to be able to go back and once again to set up worship in the tabernacle, because that's where again they God's presence came to be with them, was in the tabernacle. But again, as believers, as we see this psalm, and we are reminded of how desperately they sought the presence of God. We are reminded as believers how fortunate we are to have the presence of God dwelling in us in the person of the Holy Spirit. And that then should cause us to long for an even more intimate dwelling, walk with the Lord eventually in eternity. And so I think we kind of take this psalm and lift it off from its original foundations, and bring it into our setting as New Testament believers. And so the particular Bible I'm looking at here on my computer screen, the writing above it says the prophet desires fellowship in God's house. And so that's what this psalm is all about. Desiring the presence, desiring a fellowship, a walk with the Lord. And so let's jump into it, and we will see how he expresses this this desire. We get it in verse 1. He says, "How amiable are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts! My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh crieth out for the living God. Yea, the sparrow hath found a house, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young, even thine altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God." And so, one of the things that we see expressed in these opening verses clearly is, again, his love for God, that he loved being in his presence, and that was his desire. He just could not keep in his, he couldn't keep quiet about his desire to be in the presence of God. That he wanted to be in the tabernacle. He wanted to be in the dwelling place of God, and he wanted to be there to worship God, to see to be in the presence of God Himself, and it was just overflowing in him. And he says, because in verse 2, he desires to worship God, that his heart was longing to be able to worship God. And I know you know, just to again remind you of the nature of the beast at that time. I probably shouldn't say the nature of the beast, but the nature of things at that time, where we, as New Testament believers, we constantly are reminded that we can worship anywhere. We can worship in our car. We can worship in our home. We can worship in our church. Again, for the Jew of that time, the presence of God was in the tabernacle, and to be cut off from that was overwhelming to to the psalmist. And so they again they wanted to be in the presence of God, worshiping God. Again, when he says for the courts of the Lord in verse 2, he's talking about the tabernacle. He wanted to be in the tabernacle. And again, notice again at the end of verse 2, he says, "My heart and my flesh crieth out for the living God." He makes it clear that he's not just talking about the building. I think sometimes I'm gonna go ahead and go there. Sometimes a lot of Christians are more in love with the building. They don't. They get all upset if this happens in the building. They don't want this. They really want to take care of the building. He wants to be clear that it's not. The building was not what he was longing for. Wasn't what his heart's desire, but the presence of the living God that was seen there. That was his desire. Verse 3 again, he says, "The sparrow found the house." Again, he wants to be in that place where, again, even the birds are close to the altar, where they're close to God. He's wanting again. He just has this overwhelming desire to be in the presence of God, and again, there's this psalm is I think just a beautiful, beautiful psalm that the psalmist here again is emphasizing that again again remember these people were only allowed to go so far in the Old Testament. They were only allowed to go so far into the tabernacle. The high priest had to go into the Holy of Holies, where God's presence actually dwelt. But as believers, we can go into the very presence of God at any time and any place. A honor, a privilege that the Old Testament saints never imagined. And I think the flip side of that, the repercussion is that sometimes we take that for granted. We take the opportunity, the fact that we have access to God. We take for granted our ability to pray. We take for granted our ability to have the presence of God dwelling in us, in the person of the Holy Spirit, and we don't fully appreciate that gift that God has given us. And I wonder this morning as we come to a conclusion, I wonder how many of us just look at verse 2. "My soul longeth, even faints for the courts or the presence of God. My heart and my flesh cries out for the living God. I wonder this morning if we can say that. Here it is. It's a Saturday, and I know we can, again, we can worship God from anywhere at any place. But I wonder, we're coming up on the weekend here on Sunday, where we have the opportunity to go into God's house and to go in and be with God's people. I wonder how many could say, you know what, my soul longeth, to my heart and my flesh cry out to be in the house of God on Sunday morning. As I've said before, Sunday church attendance is a Saturday decision. When our heart begins to long, can we miss church? Can we miss being with God's people? Can we be absent and it really not bother us? Can it not cause a longing in our soul? And so this morning, I would encourage you just to do a little introspection, a little self examination, and ask yourself, do I sound like the psalmist? Do I have that kind of hunger, that kind of thirst, that kind of desire to be in the presence of God? Not just in church on Sunday morning, but in my daily life, to walk and to talk with God Himself. Does my heart long for that presence? If not, let me encourage you to begin to seek Him, to begin to pray that He would give you that hunger, that desire, that you would walk with Him and hear from Him and have a intimate relationship with Him. All right. Hope that encourages you to draw closer, and hope to see you in God's house tomorrow morning for worship. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here Monday morning.